Shalom, shalom. Today, Coffee with Kim, and we are live. Let me make sure. There we go. All right, we're live, and I'm so glad to be with you. And today in the Theater of the Absurd. And believe me, we are going to enter the Theater of the Absurd today. Because just when you think it can't get any more absurd, enter into what we're calling today the Theater of the Absurd at your own risk. Welcome to Coffee with Kim. It's so good to be with you today. And I see Lionel, you're here with us today, and Faber, you're here with us. It's so good to see you guys. And many more will be coming on. We have on an average between 100 and 200 people that actually are viewing this program on a daily basis when we're on. And so if you're new to the program, if you just happen to light on us and passing by, let me know where you're from. And we are here in Jerusalem today. It doesn't look like Jerusalem. It's like a typical office, doesn't it? But we are very, very fortunate today to be in a typical office with good internet here in Jerusalem. So anyways, as I said, enter at your own risk today, because this definitely will be the Theater of the Absurd today. All right, it's so good to see you, Benjamin, Rosie, great to see you guys. All right, now I want to start off with something that, you know when things get you under your funny bone, and you just can't stop smiling about them. Well, this one really, this is a real tickler. So, you know what? I forgot to get water and coffee. So if I have to yawn a little bit, it's not late here, folks, at all. So I never, side note, while people are coming on, side note, I actually don't yawn because I'm tired most of the time. I yawn, and many of you do, if you do, because I'm not getting enough oxygen. I'm not stopping and breathing enough. So I need a good breath. Everybody take a deep breath. Here we are. All right. Okay. Early morning. It's morning there in the States. Good morning, America. All right. So let's start off with the show that I think is in its 7th and final season on Netflix, called Orange is the New Black. Now, I have personally never watched, hi Jack, hi Kathy, I have never watched Orange is the New Black. I know it's about a women's prison. I've heard that it has its humorous moments, but I've never watched it. However, in an article here, all right, Scottish officials crack down on kosher inmates. I just couldn't help but take a look at this article, and here's how this plays out. So on the show, all right, the show has inspired, let me read it, prisoners around the world in many ways, including giving some the idea to convert to Judaism, like the character Cindy. I guess Adrienne C. Moore, she converts to Judaism while she's in prison. So she converts in order to get kosher meals, which inmates apparently regard as tastier than standard prison grub. In fact, so many prisoners claim to be Jewish in one Edinburgh prison that officials have cracked down, according to the report in the British newspaper. So this particular show, where she converts to Judaism so she can get kosher food in the prison, it took off like wildfire. And now they've got this whole movement within the prison system around the world of people converting to Judaism just so they can get kosher food. I think that is got to go down in history as one of the most funny and I think pretty cool things that's happening in the prison system today. So let me read on a little bit more. In 2014, just 9 inmates, in of all places, Scotland, right? Like Scotland, if you've ever been to Scotland, have you ever asked anybody in Scotland about God? They will answer you, the majority. I'm sure there's a few out there, but if you ask them about God, the majority will say to you, well, we don't talk about God, we don't learn about God, I don't know anything about God. All right, a very interesting area, right? So here we go. In 2014, just 9 inmates in Scotland's penitentiaries were registered as Jewish. But in the following year, after season 3 of the series, in which Cindy converts to get better dinners and ends up embracing her newfound faith, that number shot up. In 2017, inspectors from the Scottish Prison Service called for an urgent investigation after almost £1 million was spent serving specially prepared kosher meals to more than 100 prisoners. I love it. I love it. Oh my God, that's one way to spread the Jewish light. That's nothing like a Jewish mamelan or food. All right, so here we go. To limit the spread of kosher noshing behind bars, the SPS made the process of applying for kosher diets on religious grounds more stringent and have since seen a drop in numbers. The Telegraph reported that the number of inmates getting kosher meals at one prison, HMP Edinburgh, has fallen by 3/4, and the total cost of feeding inmates at the jail dropped by £80,000 in the last year. The total cost of feeding inmates throughout the country in this period dropped by more than £90,000. An SPS spokesman said that for several years we had a number of people who claimed to be Jewish and were only able to eat a kosher diet when in all probability they weren't. To combat this, we introduced a policy which was more rigorous registration, and we have since across Scotland had fewer kosher inmates. Apparently, as the ad for Levy's Jewish rye bread used to say, you don't have to be Jewish to love Levy's, but you do have to be Jewish to get kosher eats these days in the Scottish prison system. All right, so Cindy has an important arc in the final season, although it's more to do with her family than her faith and food. No spoilers, though, for those who couldn't binge the new season yet because they were busy celebrating Shabbat. All right, so that was just such a cute article in the Post. Again, if you're just coming on, just so cute. Scottish officials cracked down on kosher inmates because they were seeing a rise of people converting to Judaism so they could get kosher meals. All right, well, I think, that's one way to spread the light there. All right, so William, it's good to see you. Jenny Senard, great to see you. Jacques, it's so good to see you. Debbie D, good to see you. Hey, Jack, we're back. All right, okay, so, all right, very funny. But now I want to talk about something a little more serious. Before we get there, let me just kind of go to this page and give you some highlights of yesterday. I have, during the winter, the apartment that I'm in actually suffered a lot of water damage around the windows and things like that. And so yesterday they came and fixed it and just kind of totally put in disarray several rooms in the house. So anyways, I couldn't go on yesterday, so let me give you a little update. on what's going on. London tells Tehran, release ship. So here we go. Britain told Iran on Monday that if it wants to come of the dark, it must follow international, I think it's supposed to be come out of the dark, it must follow international rules and release a British-flagged oil tanker seized by its forces in the Gulf. Iran's elite Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps commandos seized the Steno Imperio. We've been talking about that near the Straits of Hormuz, and that took place July 19th. So now, they have a chance. They can just swap out ships, or Britain can, because what Britain did was legal, what Tehran did was illegal. And so, we'll keep an eye on this, because it'll be interesting to see how Britain wants to play this out. All right, okay, so Iran comes out. It says it now can detect stealth aircraft. Unfortunately, it happened to miss the 2 stealth aircrafts and took out, let's see if I have it here. Let's see. It says it can detect it, but it just happened to miss these 2 that just took place. All right, and that is the Israel sent 2 F-35s to attack Iranian targets in Iraq. Oops. All right. Okay, so we have a new replacement potential for the head of U.S. intelligence. President Donald Trump said Sunday he was replacing the director of national intelligence, Dan Coats, whose views on the threat posed by Russia often conflicted with the president's, with Republican John Ratcliffe, a Texas Republican and Trump loyalist. So, looks like Ratcliffe could be the new U.S. intelligence director. Okay. Ratcliffe, by contrast of Coates, is a prominent critic of former special counsel Robert S. Mueller and his investigation. He served on both the House Judiciary Committee and the House Intelligence Committee, giving him 2 opportunities to question Mueller last week. A former federal prosecutor, Ratcliffe, accused Mueller of overstepping his authority by declaring Trump was not exonerated of obstruction of justice. By doing that, you managed to violate every principle in the most sacred of traditions about prosecutors not offering extra prosecutorial analysis about potential crimes that aren't charged. So, this man is fiercely loyal. We'll just read the bottom part here. It says Ratcliffe's appointment comes at an important moment for matters related to Russia. With the special counsel investigation over, Attorney General William Barr has been conducting a wide-range internal review of whether the case was handled appropriately. As part of the effort, Trump gave Barr additional authority to review and declassify classified material. Ratcliffe could grease the wheels for that process at the time when Trump is eager to show that he and his campaign were treated unfairly. All right. So, new intelligence, we've got new intelligence, we have new national security director, so new. All right. And lastly, I mentioned this the day before we went off, and I'm going to mention it again, just a little bit today, but Iran admits to enriching 24 tons of uranium since signing nuclear deal. All right, no biggie there. We knew that. We knew that going into the nuclear deal. And I talked at length the other day about how Ben Rhodes, during the time of the Iranian nuclear deal, happened to create an echo chamber to create messaging that was not true regarding the Iranian nuclear deal to the American people to gain the backing of this deal. And now Ben Rhodes it appears, all right, and just appears that Ilhan Omar is picking up his tweets. So obviously they are now also creating some serious messaging, especially concerning anti-Israel messaging. This is what I'm taking a close look at, is the anti-Israel bias and anti-Israel messaging now that is being perpetrated and fostered by the same group, all right? President Obama may not be in office, but don't you think he's not gone, folks, and his group. Don't think that's out of the way there. But the same group is fostering this messaging, and now we have the four apocalyptic horsewomen are mimicking and parodying that message for them in Congress. And with that, talking about the absurd, I said we're going to come into the absurd today. Yesterday, the headlines in the news was absurdity. UN condemns Israel as world's only violator of women's rights. All right, I'm going to read this to you, but I just want you to see the headline for yourself. All right, there it is. UN condemns Israel as the world's only violator of women's rights. Now, if you don't think the UN has something out for Israel, I don't know what to say. How absurd is this? It's gonna get absurd. Just hang in there now and stay with me. All right, so let me read this very short article to you. It says the United Nations Economic and Social Council passed 2 resolutions last week that declared Israel the sole violator. Just those words, sole violator of women's and human rights in the world. I mean, come on. There's the first problem with that, all right, is first of all, Jews have led the fight for women's rights around the world. In America, Jews led, all right, the whole movement for women to vote. All right, so right off the bat, we have an issue here. Women are in the government here in Israel. Women have a lot of rights in this country. And so isn't it interesting that the UN says Israel is the sole violator of women's and human rights. Now, that just brings you into the, definitely into the world and community of the absurd. It just reminds me of the great musical that came out, The Greatest Showman, when he buys that museum, which was, all the wax museum that he buys, and it's like, welcome to the world of the absurd. All right, so here we go. The 54-member body, which includes the likes of Iran, India, Pakistan, Sudan, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela, all right, voted to name only Israel as the violator of women's rights. 40 nations supported the resolution out of 54, which stated that the Israeli occupation remains a major obstacle for Palestinian women and girls with regard to the fulfillment of their rights. No mention of Sharia law here. No mention of the fact that a lot of times women don't even get birth certificates, or the fact that, if they do something the family doesn't like, they just stick a stone around them and throw them into the pool. no mention of the fact that well, let me come back to that in a minute. I have more to say about that, okay? Let me just keep going on, all right, before I chase a rabbit. I don't want to chase a rabbit. All right, it says the body calls upon Israel, the occupying power, to immediately cease all measures that violate the human rights of the Palestinian people, and stresses that Palestinian civilians, particularly women and children, whom, by the way, Hamas uses as human shields, but no mention of that. No, none whatsoever. All right, account for the vast majority of those adversely affected by the conflict. According to UN Watch, a non-governmental organization, or an NGO, that documents the UN's anti-Israel bias, the United States and Canada were the only countries to vote against the resolution. 9 others abstained. Shortly after passing that measure, and the 9 that abstained, we look at Europe and notice that all of these others were Arab countries, okay? But I don't like to use the phrase, shame on you. I really don't like that phrase at all. But I will say that if you abstained in this particular vote, you do not have a backbone or a government of justice in your country. So it goes on to say, shortly after passing the measure, the UN Council members approved another resolution generally blaming Israel for the social and economic problems of the Palestinians. Not the fact that they get millions in international aid and they use it to create bombs and build tunnels and really train. They have terrorist training camps, and this is how they use all the money. They don't use it on the infrastructure. And it's interesting. I'm not sure how Israel can be the problem there because they get plenty of money to run the country. Israel doesn't get that money. The Palestinians get that money. So what do they do with it? Is the rich get richer and the poor get poorer? Where's it going? All right, so in fact, I read a very interesting article the other day that Qatar is giving a very generous sum of money to help the Palestinians, especially because the Palestinians right now are going through a very, very difficult economic time, and that has nothing to do with Israel, not at all. It's their own mismanagement and abuse of funds, and the fact that nations are seeing right through the Palestinians right now, and they are not giving the money the way that they were. And so now the majority of the country is only receiving 60% of its normal wages, which are quite low, by the way. So Qatar stepped in to boost that and gave a large sum of money. I don't have the statistics right in front of me. However, what it came down to, what was going to each family was, I believe, $100 for a month. So you can see how dire the economic situation is. And it's so interesting that Israel just cannot get away from being the scapegoat. Whether you go back to ancient biblical days, you go back to the last 2,000 years, you go back and you come to today, Jews, Hebrews, the house of Israel is the scapegoat for the woes of the world, the sins of the world, the woes of the world, the problems of the world. And so the UN once again has tried to cover up, and hear me, You see, it's their own issues they're trying to cover up by projecting the problem onto Israel. Because Europe funds the Palestinians. And they never want to say that they did something bad or wrong. So because they don't want to admit the guilt of their own bias, they project the issue onto Israel. This is the reality of what's going on behind the scenes. So Nikki Haley comes out. The former U.S. ambassador to the UN tweeted on Thursday, "It amazes me how the UN condones votes like this. It's a total mockery of human rights. To allow Saudi Arabia, Iran, Pakistan, and Yemen to name Israel as the world's only violator of women's rights. Hashtag embarrassing." So, in the Hall of Absurdity, it says the UN reached new heights of absurdity by singling out Israel alone on women's rights, yet saying nothing on Iran holding women's rights lawyer Nasreen Sotoudeh behind bars. Saudi Arabia jailing and torturing women's rights activists and subjugating women under harsh male guardianship laws, or on Yemen denying women hospital treatment without the permission of a male relative. When you have Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen among the UN Council members accusing Israel of violating women's rights, you are in the theater of the absurd. The Netherlands is one of the countries that voted to condemn Israel. No biggie there, they always do. Because they also, and listen to me, how perverted the world is. Because you see, they also are guilty of abuse of women. You know why? Because they do nothing to stop the sex slave movement. They allow women prostitutes, young girls, to have open sexual activities in their streets. So everybody can watch. That's abuse, folks. To allow women to become that degraded in society, where they have no human worth, no value, they're just a sex slave, and it's legal. And you're telling me that Israel is the sole violator of women's rights? Oh, folks, this is the theater of the absurd. Dutch, serious. All right, just go there and see for yourself, folks. Dutch lawmakers from 6 parties disagreed with the vote and submitted an official parliamentary query to the foreign minister asking, do you consider this to be proportional? The fact that they're the sole violator? All right, so somebody's going to have to reply to that. So on that note, and I am sure this was not coordinated like this. So in the paper yesterday, take a look. Israel's Arab problem. And before I go off and highlight some key points of that, let me see who's with us. I see Shelley. Hey, Shelley. You are so welcome. Lila, good to see you. Sharon, great to see you. Shane, good to see you. Darla, it's good to see you. Crystal, hey Crystal. Veronica, so good to see you. Good morning, Paul. Good morning, Angel. It's so good to see you. Can you make a hat? No, I can't, Jack. I have never been good at those things. Making hats or making airplanes, you know, my paper airplanes, they don't get very far. If they even get off the ground at all. All right, thanks. Darlene, good to see you. Amanda, good to see you. Janie, again. Jacques, good to see all of you today. All right. Okay, so let's just wrap it up with this interesting article. An article, once again, that, you know, like anything in the media, it's going to have most of the time the bias of the one that is writing, and that's okay. You know what? That's the cool thing about freedom of speech and freedom of the power of the written word, is that you're allowed to write with your bias. But the best writers, the best journalists, are those that can be objective, and the best academics when they write academic papers. I'm terrible at it, by the way, because I am much more of a journalist when I write, even when I vlog. I'm a journalist in my research, and I interject. I definitely interject my thoughts on something, and at times my bias, for sure. But to be objective, that is the best. To be able to look very you know, kind of at both sides of the story and really see that which is obscure in between. That's a real gift. And so, you know, with every article, you always have to consider that. And you also have to consider, you know, how do you think about this? So don't just take, I want, you know, I don't just take things at face value. A lot of times, even when I take something and I'm like, oh, I better check that out. So I actually do my own little bit of research going on behind the scenes to make sure, you know, like we just did with Baltimore, make sure the numbers are right now, make sure the statements that are being made are truthful, or they have some element of truth to them. But in this case, I do know, with the depth of research I have done in Middle Eastern studies, that this is far more true than we would like it to be. This article was written by Emily Schrader and Muhammad Zoabi. In 2019, thousands of Israeli women and men took to the streets to protest the slew of murders against Israeli women and the government's lack of accountability in holding the perpetrators accountable. Now, to be clear, all right, whether you are Jewish or Arab, if you are in certain areas like Area C, you have an Israeli citizenship. All right, you're an Israeli citizen. So when you see a statement like this, when I read this statement, I happen to know that we're not talking about these murders being committed or perpetrated among the Jewish community. So right away, you know, the way it's written can lend you to think that Israel has a real problem in the Jewish community of murdering its own women. And that is not the case. All right. So what are they protesting? Okay. So let's keep going. Since 2000, over 20 women have been murdered annually, and the police and the government have been woefully lacking in protecting women against domestic violence, rape, and other forms of gender-based violence. Now, very honestly, those are not good statistics, but in light of many, many areas in the world, they are quite low. But in a community that is this tight, and you know, a community of 7 to 8 million, this can be quite high. So, yet, the elephant in the room is that of the 25 women who were murdered in what was classified as gender-based violence last year, all right, approximately half of them were from the Arab community. Now we're starting to talk. In 2017, the figures were similar. How can it be that 50% of the victims are from a population that consists of 20% of the entire population, with little or no intervention from the state? Well, let me just interject here. We're going to read a little bit more and some statistics here, but the bigger problem is that Israel can't interject into a lot of these situations as the state, because a lot of these murders and situations are religious, and they're in clans. They are family ruled, and this once again becomes a real problem. So let's keep going. Even more appalling, based on research conducted by the Knesset, one out of 4 women in the Arab community has faced verbal or physical violence in the past year, and I would think that would even be higher. Additionally, there are over 420,000 Arab women over 18, and over 105,000 of them have experienced gender-based violence. Now, this is coming from within their own communities. This is coming from within the Palestinian communities. Now, this is the issue here. You see how they are deferring the problem, all right, to the Israelis, when the problem is in the Palestinian Arab communities themselves. So you know they never want to take accountability or responsibility for their own actions. Never. So let me keep going. In murder cases against Arab women, the state has only had a 20% success rate in holding perpetrators accountable. Well, first of all, one of the reasons is because the Palestinians don't even believe that Israel should exist. And it doesn't want, all right? It does not want Israel's assistance at any level in their domestic issues. Go on. When criticized for these figures, the common response on the street is that the Arab community is too conservative and hinders the investigative process. It's their problem mentality. And that is so true. I mean, they don't have a respect for women. They don't regard women with respect like you will see in the Western world. All right, at the state level, despite the disappropriate amount of violence against Arab women, no significant effort has been made to combat this trend in the Arab communities. Once again, whose problem is this? Is it Israel's problem? Or is it the Palestinians who are consistently claiming that this is their land, their state, their, all right? Mine. All right, whose problem is it? Okay. So you have to ask yourself these questions. All right, if the violence against Israeli Arab women is disproportionately higher than in other communities, should not the state be investing more resources combating violence? Who should be investing resources? Do the Palestinians even care about women? I don't know. They use them as human shields. I don't know. Do they care? Obviously, out of 105,000 out of 420,000 are being beaten. I don't think so. All right. Do we care? Yes, we care. We care. An average, now listen, here are some of the statistics. An average of 70 criminal domestic violence complaints are filed every day. With 13,000 violent assault complaints by women over the past year, of all complaints filed, nearly 70% are closed without any charges brought. Of 24,424 complaints of violence filed by women to police, only 70% resulted in indictments against the alleged perpetrators. These statistics are shocking and demonstrate a systematic problem in dealing with gender-based violence in the State of Israel, and the situation is even more dreadful for Israeli Arab women. In the Arab community, according to the Knesset research, half of the women who were murdered in 2018 were already known to the state by social services. Once again, the problem we have here, whether it is inside of the Palestinian or clan communities, all right, there's no access. This is a religious thing. And then even if you go into the Haredi communities, where there is also an issue, or even in the secular communities where there could be issues, all right, all over the world. I mean, this is not new. What kind of access does the social system have here to help these women? And this, this is something that I am sure is going to come up that has to be addressed. How can you help women who can't, or who you don't have access to help? All right? They're reaching for help, they're wanting help, but they are really caught in a system, not a system that just exists here in the government, but it's the religious and clannish system that exists within the Arab community. This is why you see these same problems in Saudi Arabia and Yemen and Pakistan. It's just Arab women do not have the same kind of mutual respect or equity that women have in the Western world. All right, now I think I drove that point home. All right, so this continues to go on. This was interesting, this statement here also. The Israeli police lack accountability in protecting and serving the Arab communities. Again, it's not because they don't want to, it's not because we didn't in the past. International pressure to really defer everything back to the Palestinians has been massive. And that's why, actually, if it were up to the majority of all Palestinians, they would much rather live under Israeli control than not. And so it goes on to say, or in Israeli sovereignty, excuse me, than under Palestinian sovereignty or Syrian sovereignty or Iranian sovereignty, etc., etc. All right. It says here, Shia Mehmo reports that on average 1/3 of Arab women who are murdered in Israel are killed with illegal weapons. Disturbingly, 80% of all illegal weapons are found in Arab communities. No brainer there. Duh. That's because they slip them through the borders. Okay. All right. While the state has an obligation to protect all of its citizens, the leadership of the Arab community and the community itself also need to take part in solving the cycle of violence. And absolutely, I think that's where it all has to begin. It has to begin with a reformation, a revolution within the Arab communities regarding the view of women and women's rights and the fact that they are not chattel. And this is how they see them. They're not chattel. They have the right, every inalienable right that God has given to humanity belongs to the women as well as to the men. So let me just wrap that article up with what they say basically at it says here, the reality is that an attack on an Israeli Arab woman is an attack on the Israeli woman. Domestic violence and gender-based violence occur in nearly every community within Israel, yet the state treats cases of gender-based violence against Arab women differently. Not because it probably wants to. It's because this issue with the international community, and I think so important when we write articles like this that we put them within context. This article actually addresses the issue, but it does not put the Arab issue in context. It doesn't put it in context according to religion, Sharia law, and international pressure, and the whole mantra and deceptive creation of a Palestinian state. I mean, people may think that illusion doesn't really, I don't want to say it doesn't really exist. I think what I want to do is flip around what I was just about to say, is the fact that illusion has been created. Many, many people believe there is a Palestinian state. Therefore, many, many people believe that Palestinians control, the Arabs are controlled, and they have governmental subsidies and helps from the Palestinians because they're a viable and working national statehood and entity. And you now see maps. I mean, I have been in meetings where people pull up maps of Israel, and it's all this state of Palestine. It is an illusion, folks. It is a deception that they have painted within the United Nations and around the world. And this deception also now creates this illusion that the Arab community has some kind of democracy and equity between men and women, and that it's looking into the future for a future hope. And the majority of that is not the case. And these women are trapped, folks. They are really trapped because the international community wants to shift all of Israel's legal responsibility to take care and protect its citizens, including the Arabs that exist in this country. They want to shift it all under this Palestinian narrative. And that puts a situation like this in a very precarious position, because who's going to help these women? They'll never get help from these terrorist organizations in the PA. Never. They don't have a view of women as being viable human beings in many ways. And then how can they get help from the very country they're a part of when they don't want it? When the men don't want it, the clans don't want it, the people don't want it. So it's a very, very, very precarious situation that Israel finds itself in when it has to deal with issues that are governed by religious laws like Sharia and international laws within its own country. So just remember to pray for the Arab women. You know, these are beautiful women. These women, they carry a burden that many of us will never, ever understand I carry a deep rejection that is very prevalent oftentimes within communities. I had just a very interesting glimpse several years ago when I had the honor of being in that community for a couple of weeks working on a project, and I had the honor of really sitting down with the women and talking to them in depth about some of the issues they face, and what we're hearing is what they faced. And I watched day in and day out as the husbands treated them like they didn't even exist. It was really, really deeply disturbing to me. I know that some of that is changing, and I hope it does change and continues to change, that women become empowered in these communities and find that way, that path to equity in the place where they're treated with the respect and honor and dignity that God created them to be treated in. So that's my comment on the absurd, the theater of the absurd, when it comes to singling out Israel as the sole world's only violator of human rights, and then taking us into the bigger issue that is really fostered and created by the international community and the Sharia law Arab culture in and of itself. So, all right, Barbara, good to see you. Laura, good to see you. Kenneth Cripps, great to see you. Julie, great to see you. Hey, Steve, how are you? That's my cuz there, folks. Samantha Wells, it's always good to see family online. Steve, great to see you. Samantha, good to see you. Lauren, great to see you. Francis, good to see you. Teresa Drosma, great to see you. All right, love your comments and questions. You have any questions? You have something you have a question about? Love to talk about it. Let me know. Let me know where you're from. And I do go back in and answer comments and stuff later on. So always feel free to leave me a question or a comment, and I'll try my best to come on back in and answer it. All right, until we talk to each other tomorrow, I'll see you then. It's been great being with you. God bless everyone, and look forward to being with you. So long. I'm leaving the theater of the absurd to go back to normal life right now. All right, you guys crush it today. Have an awesome day. Thanks, Crystal. All right, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.